And Amy, so Attorney General Sessions addressed the press yesterday after the Washington Post story and the resulting hyperventilating from Democrats, both on the Hill and in the press corps, saying he was honest about his testimony during his confirmation hearing was honest, including that particular exchange between him and Senator Stuart Smalley, who is good enough and doggone it.
And people like me.
Yeah, right. Here's Jeff Sessions on that exchange with Al Franken.
My reply to the question of Senator Franken was honest and correct as I understood it at the time. I appreciate that some have taken the view that this was a false comment. That is not my intent. That is not correct.
And then he went on to explain what his state of mind was in responding to the question posed.
I was taken aback a little bit about this brand new information, this allegation that surrogates, and I had been called a surrogate for Donald Trump, had been meeting continuously with Russian officials, and that's what it struck me very hard, and that's what I focused my answer on. And in retrospect, if I should have slowed down and said, but I did meet one Russian official a couple of times, that would be the ambassador.
So that's oversight, not thinking of himself and kind of his role as, and the question was about his role as United States Senator, as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, thinking it's a campaign-related question. He concedes that point. That is not the same thing as perjuring yourself. That is not the same thing as being intentionally misleading. And it's certainly nothing that is even close to rising to the level of the need to step down from his position as Attorney General. That actually is risible. And don't believe little old Dan. Believe big superstar attorney with the TV show, Greta Van Susteren.
I look at this through my lawyer eyes, and I'm a little bit surprised at the U.S. senators who called for his resignation, who are lawyers themselves, like Senator Harris from California, Casco from Missouri. It's stunning to me because he's doing exactly textbook what you're supposed to do.
There it is. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend David Freddoso. He, of course, is he's a writer and columnist for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. David, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
So Ted Cruz has called this a nothing burger. You heard Greta Van Susteren. We know of the hypocrisy of Senate Minority Leader Pagliacci and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who rallied to the defense of Loretta Lynch when she had an ex parte conversation with Bill Clinton while Hillary was under FBI investigation. No calls for recusal, much less resignation at that juncture. So what do we got here with Jeff Sessions?
Well, the way it looks to me is he got this line of questioning about Trump people during the campaign coordinating with Russians somehow in what was framed in the press, at least, as something malevolent. And, he gets these questions and he says, of course not. That's ridiculous. I've never had any contact with Russians, without necessarily thinking about his, the fact that he talked to the ambassador at the Senate office with his aides present and everything. The way I would view it is there's certainly nothing wrong with him. I mean, he had just been talking to the Ukrainian ambassador the day before. I think he had received something like 26 different ambassadors over the course of that same year. That's the fact is there may not be anything malign or strange about him actually doing this. The question is, should he have, first of all, had the presence of mind to say something about it? And second, it has to have dawned on him at some point since that hearing that, in fact, I did actually, have the ambassador into the Senate office. I probably should have said something about that, and maybe I should send a clarification to the committee. But he waited until he got caught, which is kind of an optics problem. I mean, it creates a much bigger problem than I'm sure he wants, and I bet he regrets right now having handled it this way.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're Democrat or Republican or Independent, I think Americans want transparency, and that really didn't happen here. But Jeff Sessions' meeting, he was with in his office in September with two of his staff members. I wonder if they were wondering, if they saw this confirmation hearing, were wondering, oh my goodness, why isn't he coming clean? But that said, are your sources telling you anything about what took place in that meeting in Jeff Sessions' office in September?
Well, what Sessions said in his press conference was that the meeting was actually a little bit testy, that the ambassador came in and he, I guess Sessions might have mentioned something that he had just had the Ukrainian ambassador in the day before, and that then the Russian ambassador started talking about how Russia was being maligned by everyone and everybody was wrong about the press. About Russia in Ukraine, and that Russia hadn't done anything wrong, and that was kind of, that made the conversation a bit tense because that wasn't Sessions' view. He's kind of a well-known hawk on the issue of Russia, or at least he had it before the presidential campaign. So that's supposedly what was discussed. And because there were aides there, two staffers who were retired military, probably, if anybody wanted to, they could get testimony about what was said in this meeting. But let's, just to make sure that the full context is here, the Russian ambassador was at the joint session of Congress on the floor with all the members of Congress the other day. He's someone who is invited to all kinds of major functions that lawmakers go to, and he's not the only senator Sessions isn't the only senator that he's talked to either in recent times. One of the other senators, Claire McCaskill from Missouri, tweeted out, I've never, ever met the Russian ambassador. What Sessions did is so unusual. And then there was another tweet of hers from a few years ago where she's saying, going to meet the Russian ambassador now.
Yep, exactly. And, well, that's just, and so this is the frustration is, the context you're providing, the additional context. I mean, as Andy McCarthy points out in National Review today, look, there's not a shred of evidence that anyone in the Trump campaign was any way complicit with the hacking, much less the hacking that affected the outcome of the election. This Sessions thing just allows the Democrats to resuscitate their Russia's hacked the election, Trump's an illegitimate president line of argumentation. And that's their real play. And that's why it's so frustrating for, I think, a lot of conservatives and Trump supporters, or at least people that want to give Trump a chance and want to see him be successful, to see Republicans like Lindsey Graham and John McCain and others wetting themselves over this.
Yeah, that's about right. I think that this is not going to be something where Sessions gets fired or anything like that. This isn't a Flynn situation where he deliberately misled someone like the vice president the way Michael Flynn had. So the other thing is that the recusal from any investigation of the campaign was the right decision. And it also came, it was made at a convenient time that I think helps offset this. Although, there's a way of confusing the two and thinking, he's recusing himself because, because he claimed he had no meetings with the Russians. But in fact, the Justice Department rules would have required that either way. They're quite strict as far as the conflicts of interest go. And, he did the right thing on that. It was convenient in that it allowed him to distance himself from the whole thing and kind of do the reasonable thing. And then, he's supposedly going to be clarifying his remarks to the Judiciary Committee as well. So, it's one of those things where he answered the question that wasn't exactly the one asked, although if you go people are playing a clip where there's just one sentence of Franken's question without showing the whole question, because the question was very much an election-related question. There's been all these allegations that the Trump campaign has been in constant contact with Russia since last year, and then he asked the question, did you have any, or what would you do if you knew about someone having contact with the Russians? And Sessions was just like, what are you talking about? And then he says what he said, which was, I haven't had any contacts with the Russians. That's ridiculous.
CNN did play the entire question yesterday, which brought a whole new light to the situation. I mean, I'm just saying, because if you need to hear the question in its entirety,
then you listen to this show if you want to hear that.
Yeah.
So here's the other issue, though, David, is the intelligence community. Wall Street Journal opines about this. The question about the deep state And is there an effort underway from the intelligence community to undermine the Trump administration?
Right. Well, I mean, it seems pretty obvious that there is. Now, the question is there a justification for it? Because theoretically, at least, you can imagine that there could be. That if there was some kind of actual, close coordination between someone who got elected, we're talking in theory here. If there was if we actually did elect a Manchurian candidate, would you want the deep state to try to do something about it? And it seems to me that let's just assume the worst. Let's just say that Trump is some kind of Russian operative, just for the sake of argument. This seems like a very passive-aggressive way of handling that. If there were a serious threat, I would hope that there would have been something a little bit more substantive and robust by now, and not this kind of petty, leaking of a little story here and a little story there. That's not going to stop the Russians if we've just elected a Manchurian candidate. Now, I don't actually think that Trump is the Manchurian candidate. I don't like his Russian sympathies, certainly. But the way that the intelligence services seem to be handling this, and a lot of former Obama intelligence aides, is this, this kind of, it really strikes you as if, the deep state is trying. I'm not going to say the word coup d'état, but can we go halfway there and sort of talk about it that way? It's not the place of the intelligence services to decide questions that they feel like the voters got wrong. So that's something that you just have to. That's something you have to keep in mind here, because we wouldn't want this. We complain about the CIA deciding foreign elections. We certainly don't want them deciding the election in this country.
Yeah, exactly. He is David Freddoso, writer and columnist for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. David, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.